Welcome to my channel. It's Saturday evening. I hope you're having a good day. Tonight I want to discuss the case of Mozart's Requiem. It is a cold case, but a closed, undisputed one. What makes it interesting is that it has several layers of partial forgery and legal plagiarism, with four main characters involved. After presenting the background, I will give my opinion about the legal issues related to what happened, both from historical and current perspective. Let's have a look at what happened from the beginning. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a musical prodigy born in 1756 in Salzburg, Austria, had been touring Europe with his father Leopold since the age of 5. He became a composer at an early age and worked in Salzburg for Archbishop Colloredo until 1781. That year in Vienna he had met Emperor Joseph II, who wanted to employ him. However, his employer, the Archbishop, was trying to block him from performing outside his establishment, which led to anger and discontent since the pay offered was a lot higher than his salary at that time. It eventually led to Mozart trying to resign, which was initially denied, but later approved under, to say the least, humiliating circumstances, with a literal kick in the arse carried out by the Archbishop's steward. This resignation caused some daddy issues as well, since his father opposed his decision and sided with the Archbishop. Mozart moved to Vienna, where he worked as a freelance performer and composer until the end of his life at the age of 35. In the beginning, he was a lodger in the Weber family, where he met their third daughter, Constanze, whom he married in 1782. Apart from Mozart himself, she became one of the main characters in this case. Wolfgang and Constanze had 6 children, but only 2 survived infancy. As his incomes increased, their lifestyle became more luxurious. He got a steady employment at Emperor Joseph II's court, but it was a part-time job and it was a low income. But the situation worsened during the recession at the end of the decade. He had lost about 66% of that income in 1788. He borrowed money to make ends meet for several years, but finally, in his final year, in 1791, his situation began to improve with a series of commissions. He started paying off his debts. One of the commissions that year was from Count Franz from Walsegg, who wanted a requiem to commemorate the death of his wife Anna, who had died at the age of 20 at the beginning of that year. The Count intended to pass the composition off as his own, which he had done previously with other compositions he bought from other composers. In the agreement, there was a secrecy clause forbidding Mozart from trying to find out who had commissioned the work. Furthermore, it stated that the Count would be exclusive owner of the manuscript, and Mozart was not allowed to keep copies or perform it elsewhere and publish it under his own name. So it more or less made him a ghostwriter for the Count. To maintain anonymity, the work was commissioned through an intermediary known as the Grey Messenger, who showed up at Mozart's residence, who in reality was the Count's steward. Half the sum was paid in advance, and the second half would be paid upon delivery of the complete work. Mozart started composing the Requiem soon thereafter, probably aiming to finish it within a few weeks to get the second half of the payment. But his life took an unexpected turn at that point. He fell seriously ill the 20th of November in what appeared to be a bacterial infection. He died in his home on the 5th of December 1791 at 12:55 a.m. at the age of 35. By then he had reached the 8th bar of the 8th movement of the Requiem, which is the Lacrimosa. On December the 7th, he was buried outside Vienna in a common grave, likely not attended by any mourners. That was 50 years after Antonio Vivaldi's funeral, which took place under similar circumstances, also in Vienna. Constanze Mozart found herself in dire straits economically, with remaining debts and the need to support herself and their 2 children. The unfinished Requiem created a problem. If it was not delivered, not only would she miss the second payment, the advanced payment may also be required to be returned since nothing was delivered. But as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Constanze came up with a plan. She turned to Mozart's student Franz Xavier Süssmayr, who she asked to complete the unfinished work. He had some scraps of paper with instructions from Mozart, which he had given on his deathbed. Süssmayr wrote the remaining half of the Requiem to the best of his ability using these instructions. Constanze and Süssmayr then forged Mozart's handwriting and rewrote the complete manuscript and signed it with Mozart's name. That enabled her to hand over the complete manuscript to the Grey Messenger signature and thereby receive the second half of the payment from Count von Waldsegg. The Count received the manuscript and immediately began his own forgery of the forged manuscript, rewriting the whole Requiem in his own handwriting and replacing Mozart's name with his own name as the composer. His plan was to attribute the work to himself and conduct it at a memorial service for his deceased wife. He could then take credit for the Requiem, and there seemed to be nothing that could stop him from doing so. Constanze Mozart had already made sure the composition was performed at public benefit concerts in Mozart's name to raise money for her and her sons. She outsmarted the Count by both getting the payment for the partially forged composition, but also by using it to earn money from these public performances, as well as selling printing rights for the manuscript. All of this was in violation of the agreement with the Count. Count von Waldsegg was furious when he found out the composition he had bought was being performed in public using the name Mozart. That led to a legal dispute, but Constanze turned out to be a savvy businesswoman. After a long dispute, they reached a settlement where the Count got some compensation while the work was publicly attributed to Mozart. As a side note, the Count conducted the Requiem at the memorial ceremony for his wife, with his name stated as composer of the Requiem, out of stubbornness or just to save face. Regarding the cause of death of Mozart, there have been several fictional theories about him being poisoned. In the movie Amadeus, it was suggested to have been done by composer Salieri due to a musical rivalry. However, there is no evidence for that being the case. On the contrary, Salieri and Mozart appear to have been friends. This conspiracy theory may also have been created from several stories told by Constanze Mozart, who talked about the mysterious messenger and that Mozart at the end began to suspect that the Requiem was intended for his own funeral. Here's my take on these events. First of all, an interesting observation is that if Mozart would have recovered from the illness, this work would most likely have been completed by Mozart and attributed to Count von Waldsegg. There is a likelihood that no one would have known that Mozart had composed it. It would have been an unfortunate situation, since this is one of the few works that I actually like by Mozart. Mozart's sudden death left it to Constanze Mozart to either fulfill or break the agreement conditions. She broke the agreement, probably out of necessity, in order to pay debts and support her children. The four players are Wolfgang Amadeus, Constanze, Count von Waldsegg, and Süssmayr. Out of these, Mozart appears to be the only one acting truthfully, all the others, for various reasons, doing deceitful acts. So who are the winners and losers? One may conclude that Mozart became the biggest loser since he died, but his death had nothing to do with the composition of the Requiem. So he neither lost or gained anything from doing it, apart from getting the advance payment. Then Süssmayr can be considered as being a loser in the economical sense, since he didn't get any compensation for writing the second half of the Requiem. On the other hand, his name became famous in a way that never would have happened without his contribution to this composition. The main loser was no doubt Count von Waldsegg, who paid 100 ducats, which is gold coins, or 450 florins, which is silver coins, for a piece of music which actually was partial forgery, since it was signed as a complete composition by Mozart. Not only was the delivered product not 100% authentic, Constanze Mozart also broke the agreement and made sure he could not use the intellectual property according to his plan. However, in the settlement, he got to keep the original manuscript. It is clear that Constanze Mozart managed not only to get the 100 ducat payment for the piece, but also thousands from the concerts and royalties from printed manuscripts of it. She effectively used the initial payment to sell tickets and to get royalties, which enabled her to live well on the rights of her husband's music. She also married a Danish diplomat, Nissen, who was an admirer of Mozart, who helped her writing Mozart's biography, as well as organizing and marketing the composer's estate, which enabled them to live a comfortable upper-middle-class life in Salzburg until her death in 1842 at the age of 80. There is no question who was the winner of these four players. Her second husband's admiration of Mozart can be seen on his tombstone, which is engraved with the text, "The husband of Mozart's widow."